The Dana Dolly is the only slider I ever wanted to have. What? Look at that. Look at that. When I started out, my first camera was a Canon T3i and I was in college. Sliders were probably the biggest thing that was coming out that became a very accessible thing for anyone to pick up. And my first slider was a DIY slider that I made from Film Riot. It wasn't really the best, but it did its thing. I eventually upgraded to a Rhino slider, and that was also a really good thing for the time. Paid around $600 for it. It was 4 feet long. It did the job. But now I decided to go all in with the Dana Dolly, and I gotta say that it's probably one of the best investments I ever did, and I also regret not buying it earlier. Now, most sliders have some interesting fundamental flaws. Now, they're good for the money, and they're good if you're either just starting out or you have a really tiny camera, but let's go over usually what the problem is. So, first of all, a slider is meant to go left to right, or even front to back. But smaller sliders have some inherent problems. First of all, the payload. So, this thing could go left and right very easily, not having anything onto it. Putting a camera on, it's probably not going to be the smoothest, but it's going to get the job done. But what if I put something like this with a head onto it, if even possible? Or what if I put the camera that's right behind, if I put this Ursa Mini Pro with the Sachtler V20 head on top of it? Probably not going to be the smoothest trip, but in that kind of case, I'm wondering if this thing would even slide in that case. And the other problem is, well, how you would mount something. Usually these sliders have a single 3/8/16 or a 1/4 20, oh dear God, screw. Now one, a single mounting point is never good, always at least 2 screws in my opinion. But unless if you're just gonna mount the camera directly to here, which, good luck, I don't recommend it, but you could do it. It also limits for what kind of tripod head you can mount to here, if you're going to mount a tripod head to one of these things. Normally there would be a little tie down screw under here, so I could, screw this in and keep the head straight, but this doesn't, so use your imagination. Wow, it's straight. It's straight. Okay, cool. Hey, it worked. Okay then. Yeah, so now that we have a head onto here, this one does not have a pan axis, but let's just pretend for the circumstances that they do. So, okay, we have a smaller, lightweight tripod over here, but the other problem that we got going on is how are we going to be leveling this out? Now, over here, I'm putting this on some speed rail, which is just inherently long in general, though, but I'm sure everyone's been in a situation where you're on some sort of uneven surface, floor, hill, and whatnot, and you need to balance things out. Now, in a non-slider roll, one thing that you can turn to is a tripod with a ball head. This allows you to rotate and swivel the camera until you have achieved balance, even if your legs aren't 100% there. But with the slider, you're expected to use feet, and this is going to take some time. So if you're on an uneven terrain, I mean, this at least gives you some levels when it comes to height, like if you need to stick up and down a tad bit higher, a tad bit lower, even swivel this kind of thing. Could you get the job done? Absolutely. Could you get the job done with the producer breathing down your neck? I mean, well, yeah, but I'd be a little scared. So those reasons and more are the reason why the Dana Dolly is just so damn good. So this hunk of metal with some skater wheels onto it is absolutely amazing for a lot of reasons, but let's first kind of get things down. First of all, if you notice over here in the middle, that's actually a Mitchell base thread, which means you're able to put a Mitchell head on top of here. And to me, whenever I think of Mitchell heads, I think heavy, and this thing can take a payload. Now, Dana Dolly people, whatever they're called, what are they? The Dana Dolly Portable Camera Dolly System, DanaDolly.com. We're just gonna call them the Dana Dolly people. The Dana Dolly people don't recommend higher payloads when it comes to working with this thing, but I gotta say, I've used this thing with a lot of heavy rigs, like probably totaling with a head like at least 50 pounds, and it's strong. It does the job. But the other thing, though, is that you're able to add a ball head into this. Now, for example, this right here is a 75mm adapter. This here is a washer. That is the bane of my existence, but at least it gets the job done. And then, voila, you have your 75mm tripod head onto the Dana Dolly, and you can operate from here. This allows you to also still do your pan and tilts like a tripod should in this case. And that's kind of the key thing. It's a Dana Dolly, though it's kind of a slider, but you kind of want to be able to use your head on a dolly. You're also able to adapt 100mm and 150mm bowls if you want as well too. Cameras such as this one filming me right now with a 100mm head is able to adapt to this thing very easily. But the Dana Dolly isn't just what actually the sled is. I mean, well, technically it is what the sled is, but the reason we're able to still have this bar going back and forth is because of these babies right over here. You have two of these things that are able to hold these two pieces of speed rail over here in place, and it is sturdy as hell. Like, to even show you how sturdy this is, yep, airborne. Yep, this is sturdy as hell. Yep, stay here all day. No, I'm not. And underneath, in order for it to go into something like this combo stand over here, we got a junior pin, which is something that all combo stands can receive. And speaking of combo stands, these in particular are actually made by American Grip that actually are specifically for the Dana Dolly to have this kind of base over here. You absolutely do not need these, but they do get pretty low, and I do like them a lot, and American Grip makes some pretty damn good stands. I'd like to reiterate something though. You can use stands. Now, there are such things as slider stands, but I've used many different times like C-stands or like cushion stands or combo stands with like a Cardellini clamp into a slider before in order to get them lifted off the ground. It's never pretty. It's never pretty at all, and also the payload is just absolutely bonkers when it comes to having that suspended in the air with the camera. This is just a gigantic piece of metal, or well, two of these pieces of metal. I almost hit the monitor and broke that. That would have been terrible. Yeah, I would have broken it because these are pieces of metal. These are sturdy, these are heavy, these are able to hold that kind of thing, and combo stands with this is very nice. Now, the one question you could be asking though, well, you could be asking a lot of questions, but one that I was asking is, well, what if you just want this to be on the ground besides combo stands? I mean, these don't really seem like that they go down on the floor really well. And you're right, these don't, but this right here kind of does. Yeah, it's always going to be flat, but it still is able to get onto the ground. What I do instead is actually something a little bit different. I got these pancakes with the junior receiver that is great because if I'm doing a job where I need to go low and high and low and high, I'm going to be using the 5/8 receiver anyway, so I might as well. Like a glove. Now, let's talk about, Now, let's talk about the speed rail itself. So this speed rail that I got going on is 6 feet long, and it's just because 6 feet is easy to fit in my car, 6 feet is easy to fit in my apartment, 6 feet is just easy in general for me to work with. But the beauty about speed rail, though, is that you can go very, very long. You can get a 10-foot piece of speed rail, you can get a 20-foot piece of speed rail, you can get a 40-foot piece of speed rail. I'm not sure how you would transport it, but you could do it. So the limitless possibilities of how long you want your Dana track are, well, until you see it in shot, I guess, and how much you could stabilize it. But it's still there, though, and as a person who grew up using like 2-foot sliders to a 4-foot slider and then wanting to keep on going longer and longer and longer, it's really good to know that I'll be able to get speed rail off of other people if I say need that for a different job. Now, I will say, though, I do love this thing, but I do know that there are some certain ergonomics that are not necessarily there that other people have been able to fine-tune to the fullest. For example, while I do like putting this into a junior receiver, putting it on the ground in other situations is pretty annoying. But Kessler actually made their thing called a shuttle dolly that actually replaces this part with feet, and then you're able to put a junior pin at the bottom of it in order to still do something like this. Kessler also gave you the option to fix the bowl onto the dolly itself, so you don't need to worry about carrying this damn washer at the end of it that you're always gonna drop. But the main reason I went with the Dana Dolly over the Kessler shuttle dolly, though, is because at this point, I mean, if people are watching this video and already used a Dana Dolly once, they probably don't know why I'm doing a review of it, because it has been around for a long time, and it's a thing that owner-operators have been renting out very frequently for like the past couple of years. The reason that I say that this is the dolly that I wish I had earlier is because I still was using sliders for a long time, and when I had smaller cameras, they were working. But the beauty of this thing, though, is you can use this for a smaller camera or a bigger camera, and as long as you're okay with the space that it takes up, it's gonna last you probably whatever iteration you're on. Now, one thing, though, if you're gonna be running multiple small cameras or you don't have the transportation in order to take all the speed rail with you, then of course, a smaller slider is probably the much better choice for you, especially if you're able to accommodate for it. But if you're somebody that's gonna be taking your slider from set to set on many different kind of jobs with many different expectations and many different start times, the Dana Dolly is something that I trust, especially if I have a second hand with me on the day. That's going to be all for the day. My name is Neil Guliano, and this was Kid Feed.